Hey guys, Montel here, and thanks so much for tuning in to this edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Our guest today is the president and the CEO of at Marijuana Business Daily, a Colorado-based business news outlet for professionals in the recreational and medical cannabis space and industry, and the most trusted B2B business-to-business news source for cannabis in the United States and Canada since 2011. He earned an MBA in international business from Regis University and has over a decade of business reporting and editorial experience. He is a legendary journalist, one of America's foremost cannabis industry analysts, and the first journalist in the United States to focus exclusively on covering the business of cannabis. Chris Walsh, thanks so much for being a part of Let's Be Blunt with Montel today. Thanks for coming on the show, sir.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk the cannabis business.
Absolutely excited to talk to you too, because in the last couple of days, I've been doing a couple of podcasts that have thrown me a little bit with the way the attitudes are about cannabis are in this country today. I'm just wondering, first off, let's back up for a second. What got you interested in the cannabis industry? You were working in what, South Korea as a foreign business editor for a foreign newspaper, and then you came back to the States and then were approached to take this job on?
Yeah, I had spent my early career in mainstream journalism as a reporter and editor at newspapers. And when I came back from Korea, wanted to get out of mainstream journalism, didn't see huge opportunities, saw where that industry was going and the struggles it faced. And so was re-envisioning what I wanted to do. And the two co-founders, Anna Cassandra, were looking for, had a post up on a journalism job site for someone to launch what became Marijuana Business Daily, and really to provide really objective professional business insights and news and analysis to what was an emerging industry that didn't have it at that time. So it appealed to me. I left for South Korea and was a business reporter in Denver. There were no dispensaries when I left in 2009. Came back two years later, and there were more dispensaries than Starbucks in Denver. So I saw what the industry was all about and what it needed, and it appealed to me, and kind of took off from there.
Now, I mean, tell me a little bit about the distribution of the. It's an online magazine and a print magazine?
Yeah, we have Marijuana Business Daily and Hemp Industry Daily online sites that really track the industry from a news perspective and provide analysis. And then we have a print magazine, Marijuana Business Magazine, and then we do market research as well on our publication side. So reports tracking the growth of the industry and the trends and retail sales and all of that.
Have you had difficulty with distribution? Because I know a lot of these online outlets, literally, try to clamp down on anything that appears to have any promotional stance in the cannabis space. So how do you get around that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I know a lot of companies struggle with that. As a media publication, we haven't run into it as much. We've been a member of the Associated Press. I remember that was a big deal for us years ago when they accepted us into their fold. So as more news and analysis, we don't face those same pressures, but we've experienced it too on social media. There were times where you couldn't find us on it, or you couldn't use marijuana when you were putting it into the search engine to find us. It's still an issue for a lot of companies today, but with our traction of 10 years, I think we've got a pretty good reach and have gotten around some of those issues.
I mean, I've been doing this podcast for now a year and a half, and still we run into issues, on a regular basis and some of it is no rhyme or reason. I mean, I think if I had one question to ask you to begin with, since we're now looking at a nation that's sitting where with, what is it, 35 states plus the District of Columbia all have some sort of cannabis law in place. Several of them are recreational, several of them are just medical. Don't you and lots of states are jumping on board because they are sniffing and trying their best to see if they can get a piece of this tax revenue. It's almost counterintuitive that they wouldn't allow people to even just talk about the product that they've authorized for sale.
Yeah, it's absurd. I mean, it's so absurd, and the landscape has changed markedly in the 10 years we've been in this, and it's been all positive. And I think that to still be in an environment 10 years later with all the states, as you mentioned, dozens of states that have legalized, including red states, blue states, the South, the Northeast, the West, all over the country, and then you have Canada federally legalizing, and then you have more than 24 countries also legalizing medical cannabis. To be in this situation where we face these restrictions and just blocking of any type of advertising in some cases. And then, of course, banking, and it's still being federal illegal. It's just a ridiculous situation, especially when you look at the public support for medical and increasingly recreational. It's still a lot has surprised me along the way over the last 10 years, including how much the industry has grown. Did not expect we'd be where we are today. But I also thought somewhere along the way, the dam would have cracked already and we would have normalized the business a bit more than we have.
Do you feel like, I mean, we have grown. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. The industry has grown, especially over the course of the last year through this whole COVID pandemic. We found that, there are several states in this country right now where there are more people employed as in the cannabis business in the state than there are civil servants in their state. So we've also seen that this seems to be almost recession proof in the sense that sales are up almost across the board. People are and burgeoning businesses are popping up, from delivery services to grows and other test facilities. It just seems crazy to me that we're living in a time where, again, we have this new administration that claimed that it was going to address this issue in its first 100 days, but we're coming up on that 100 days and they've not said a peep other than to fire people in their administration that didn't disclose their previous cannabis use, which is really baffling to me. I mean, does this not throw you for a loop or make you go, I wonder what the heck is going on here?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, that what you just mentioned was pretty shocking to me, and I don't, we don't know the full story, and the White House is trying to spin it, but regardless, it looks pretty bad, and it doesn't seem like it's an overly friendly administration based on something like that. Vice President Harris has been pretty vocal about loosening laws on marijuana, so we're hoping that she is the sage advisor to Biden that gets him around and other advisors around really moving this forward. And you've got Schumer too.
But it's hard, baby, let me not only to cut you off, but I find it hard to trust Vice President Harris when, during her tenure as the Attorney General, she put more brown and black people of color in prison than her predecessor did during a period of time when there was legalization in the state. So,
Absolutely.
there seems to be almost, again, there's this two fork split tongue thing happening here. I'll say what I need to say to get elected. Then once I get elected, screw you. And I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, you bring up a fantastic point. I think that that is very worrisome. I will say that people have evolved in cannabis and their views on it rapidly. So I think we should look at people's history on it, and that's a big portion of how we view them and their approach to it. But also, realize that people have kind of had a mindset change in a very short period of time. We've seen it across the board. Even the general public has. People that 8 years ago thought marijuana was the devil weed are now using it themselves, or their grandma is. So things change. But yeah, I think that is worrisome, and it's hard to tell if anything is really going to be pushed through and how strong that support really is, or is it just lip service? And I don't have an answer to it. I do hope that people like Chuck Schumer and the fact that he is waving a flag for this industry and making it one of his top priorities is significant. Now, whether that leads to anything, we don't know, or whether that can sway others, we're not sure. But there's more positive than I've seen now since we've been in this industry for the potential for federal change. But there's it's no guarantee.
Absolutely. Now, your approach is more of a B2B approach. Do you guys do any articles on just education to see if you can educate the B2C? Because I think that that's probably, from my perspective, has been the one thing that has been really lacking in this industry. This industry has spent this last 5 years doing as much as it could possibly do to support the B2B idea, but forgot the fact that it's the consumer out there, just like in the pharmaceutical industry that drives new pharmaceuticals. The approach of letting the consumer understand that there's an alternative out there. They go to their doctor. The doctor then has sales reps that come to their office and put product in their office. That doesn't seem to be happening as much in this industry as it has in other industries. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think our focus as a business in this industry has always been on the B2B side. To your point, we did that mindfully because we've always felt we need to help professionalize the industry and to help fuel where it's going and do it in a responsible way. So even from the first event we held in 2012 in an old Masonic lodge in Denver with 400 people, I was wearing a suit and tie when I spoke. That was different in the industry. It doesn't need to be suits. The only reason I bring that up is that we were trying to help this industry gain more acceptance by helping the industry grow in the right ways and the professional ways that put a good shine on it for outside, so that we can help fuel laws and change. And so we've stuck to that core along the way, and we have considered that kind of B2C and educating consumers, but have stayed in the business side. You're absolutely right. I think there's a lot of information for consumers out there, but it's of varying quality, and a lot of it isn't great. There are others who focus on that end, and we might go in that direction down the road. But for now, we're really focused on the business side.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot of information there. You can call if you have the mindset of investigating and researching and reading, you can get the information you need. But the majority of the public doesn't do that. The majority of the public waits for the ad about whatever on TV, and that's what drives them to go and ask a question. I think it was a perfect case in point when it comes to this, industry. It took Sanjay Gupta, that special that they did, which was on CBD, that literally lit up, the internet and got people to say, I wonder if that might work for my child. And it seems to me lately, I've just been disappointed in the fact that, there aren't venues or there aren't avenues to go down to get that information called together, put right in your face the way it should be to help this industry really blow up the way it should.
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with you there. I do think there's a lot of opportunity to help in a different way than's being done now, both patients and regular consumers of cannabis, to really understand aspects of marijuana and of CBD and all the other things coming down the road.
And so there have been a considerable amount of articles written lately about various things from flavonoids to terpenes to, the fact that, we have, I think wrongfully, and I actually even spoke to Sanjay about this personally, about the fact that, did he think that his special did a service to the industry? And he said he did, but they overemphasized the idea of CBD, CBD, CBD as a holy grail. And they know that now. I mean, there's CBG, there's CBN, there's the variants, there's the active forms of some of these cannabinoids that have just as much medicinal viability as any of the ones that we've looked at to date. But that information is just slowly trickling out. And I just think that, if there were venues, but again, because of the way the laws are written, that you can't even say the word marijuana. It's kind of insane to try to figure out how do you educate people if you can't say the word.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point about what's coming next and the increased interest and demand and CBG and CBN and all those other compounds. I think is fascinating, and you are starting to see the industry embrace that, and it's kind of where the demand is coming up first, and the industry hasn't really been pushing that, but people have been wanting that, and they've been wanting to know more about it. One of the challenges is there isn't a lot of research on it, just like marijuana in general, because it's been blacklisted for so long, more or less, by the government for research dollars and all that. So I think we're going to see a quick shift in kind of that educational side, and hopefully some research to help get the information people need to make good decisions about what will work for them for whatever reason.
I think some of that research, like you said, I mean, and a lot of people think that there's not a lot of research out there, but you'd be shocked. I think we all are could be shocked at the amount of research that has been done, funded by the U.S. government. Which is really this kind of oxymoron. All the work that Meshulam did back in the '90s. We put money into that. All the we were funding his research in Israel. We were giving him $50 million a year to go down that path to find out and identify things like the endocannabinoid system and where the receptor cells are and what's antagonized by various versions of cannabinoids. The research is out there. I think it's now a matter of finding outlets that will allow the research to be disseminated. I mean, again, like I said, we've had some issues here where I have to. I'm not being careful to be careful, but I want to make sure that we stay more on the vein of information and education. I don't do promotion, and that's allowed us to kind of navigate a lot of the outlets that carry podcasts. But I can make a simple mistake, and the next thing you know, somebody wants to bump one of my podcasts off for some crazy reason. I have no idea
Yeah,
why.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, having been at the pulse, I mean, you were considered, one of the, foremost authorities on the cannabis business in this country today. Just if you could maybe take a look, take us on a little journey of where we were, say, 5 years ago, and where we are today.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
I'll go just briefly back 5 years before that. But when we first started, I remember going to an industry group in Denver of leaders here. Again, the industry was very fledgling in a very uncertain legal state. And it was just for kind of executives and entrepreneurs, a very select group that would meet regularly. And they let me come as we started this publication. And I went to the restroom, and one of the guys in the urinal next to me says, "You seem all right, man, but you're not an FBI agent, are you?" And so there was, these were people running businesses in that time in 2011. That was kind of the atmosphere, right? You didn't know who was who, and who, if someone was tracking you or whatever. And then, 5 years later, 2015, 16, you had mainstream players getting in. You didn't see a ton of crackdowns unless you were really, really doing something, wrong, like diverting to the illegal market. But it was still fledgling. I mean, rec was still an experiment. We didn't know. It seemed to be, the sky wasn't falling. There were good sales, and people were starting to embrace it. But the atmosphere was a lot different. And when we at our MJBizCon, our big conference, when we tried to get keynote speakers from outside the industry, like business people who could share their insights, it didn't even have to be on cannabis, but share their insights that would be relevant to other business owners. No one was interested because of that stigma around cannabis. And so just to kind of give people an idea, since then, we've had, Kevin O'Leary of Shark Tank. We've had a lot of other people, big business people, that are now involved, or they're willing to get out in front of a crowd of marijuana business owners and talk. And so I think the big change from 5 years ago is just the acceptance by everyone, by the public, by people in business, by investors. Now, there's been other change that hasn't been good, and some of that is tied to what I just mentioned. I think the industry is starting to lose its what made it great in the early days. It was a scrappy industry fueled by people who had a passion for what they were doing, and a different type. It wasn't the old school type of industry. And I think that we're starting to lose some of that as it becomes more corporate, as the bigger players come in. And so while we can celebrate all this growth that we've seen, and all these new opportunities, and all these social equity moves that are at least being undertaken right now, and there is somewhat of a focus in some areas, there's a lot of concerns over how the industry is changing as it matures.
Well, you just brought that up about the social equity, emphasis that I think is just lip service, to be absolutely honest with you. So sorry, I've been down this path with a couple of different companies who were just saying, "Well, can't you just find me a black farmer that'll sign this free paper just to put a name on a piece of paper, and could give a crap less whether or not that farmer ever really was part of or participant in what they were trying to move forward." So I mean, I think the industry, I agree with you 100%. The legacy industry seems to, it's almost as if there's an attempt to push the legacy industry out, but at the same time, big pharma is going to have a real hard time gaining any credibility in this space when they have fought this space for as long as they have. I mean, it's almost like, there's going to have to be some deaths out here before, and people are going to have to go away before people will recognize that maybe there's a possibility for change in a certain company. But I find it almost difficult. I wouldn't trust any cannabis that came out of XYZ pharmaceutical company when I know that 3 years ago, XYZ pharmaceutical company was one of the biggest, naysayers in the cannabis space. Now all of a sudden they're jumping aboard because they see a dime and they smell a penny. It'd be tough for the majority of consumers in this current baby boomer generation, and the millennial generation, and even the Xers, to trust them. Um, which I think is really kind of interesting, because when our approach is extremely different from some other countries. I spent time in Israel back in 2010. I've been involved in this space since 2001, long before it was vogue. It was time that I was, traveling around the country, uh, speaking to different legislations and talking to different politicians, advocating for safe access for patients around the country that I really felt I was out there on a limb by myself. That was like from maybe 2002 to 2010, 11. Then from 2011 moving forward, I found it really kind of tough to seem to break the nut of those that were interested in trying to see if there was any social equity available in the space. And I still find that tough today. Do you think that there's a better attitude growing, burgeoning in this industry to say, let's stop for a second and recognize that, the truth behind cannabis is different than we thought it has been. It was literally something that was made illegal, not for any other reason other than as an enslavement tool to keep those brown and black people repressed. Because, when you look back over time since 1937, 80% of the people who have been incarcerated for crimes associated with cannabis are people who are brown and black. Maybe there's an opportunity for some of these businesses to allow that participation.
Yeah, it's a mixed picture right now. And first, thank you for all the work you did back then. That helped pave the way for where we are today. All of that work when you were the only one out there, or one of a few, it took a lot of change over a lot of years and a lot of effort to get where we are today. So that's fantastic. You were doing that for that decade and really paving the way for where we're at. I think it's a complicated topic. I think, one of the things is that there are moves for social equity in general, and lawmakers, regulators are taking it up. It is hard to tell, is it lip service? Is there a way to do this effectively? And we have a chance with this industry to do something different, to be a different industry. And you talk about pharmaceuticals, and I think a lot of us cringe who have been in it. We don't want that. We don't want that type of approach and that atmosphere and that way of running things. And that's what's at risk right now. And I think there is opportunity. And one of the things I'm encouraged by is that I do think, I emerged from in my CEO position from a difficult year for us in the pandemic, very, very difficult for our business model, even though the cannabis industry held up relatively well. So I've been getting back out there externally and talking, and I'll say, talking to other executives over the past 2 months on a consistent basis, it is a topic that comes up in almost every conversation. So there is an awareness at the very least. That's not enough, an awareness, but that wasn't anything anyone was talking about a couple of years ago. So I have to say, I'm encouraged by that. It's not enough, but I want to acknowledge that it is absolutely on the minds of a lot of people for whatever reasons. It's on the minds of legislators. I know states are trying to do things with social equity, and some of them, may work, and a lot of them probably won't. And there's controversy over everything. But it was not baked into any laws. It wasn't even a discussion to make this an inclusive industry. And so I'm encouraged by that being probably in the top five, discussion areas that are out there in the industry that people are talking about. Now, it's not even close to where it needs to be, and it is discouraging, the makeup of the industry when we had this great opportunity to make it different. And when you fold in the history of what you've mentioned and how the laws have adversely affected some areas of the population, and then those areas, those people aren't getting involved because they can't, because it's all many reasons, or it's very difficult. It's sad that where we are, that there isn't more diversity in the industry. So to your question, I think there are opportunities. I think there's an awareness. Some of it absolutely is lip service, no doubt. Some of it I think is genuine. I don't know if anyone's figured out the right answer. But there's more nonprofits that are emerging to give funds to entrepreneurs and business owners across the spectrum to feed inclusion in the industry and change the dynamics of it, so it's not just kind of operated by a certain type of people. So I'm encouraged by that, but there's a long way to go.
Gotcha. Well, you mentioned it during what you were just saying. You were talking about, some of your previous conferences, and you did hold the marijuana business conference, which took place. And I got to say, I was very happy to have attended back in 2017. I think it was when I was there, and thought it was one of the best things I'd ever been at in life. Do you plan on having another conference this year? And if so, would you have that in person, or would you try to do that virtually? What are you thinking?
Yeah, we're going full steam ahead with a return to MJBizCon in Las Vegas in October of this year in person. We went all virtual last year with everything we did. And but the way things are shaping up with the virus, with where we're getting into the nation and a world, we think we're going to be able to hold a good, big industry gathering safely for everyone by October. And so we're coming out of the gates, and we're talking to people every day. And I'll tell you, this industry was built on face-to-face connections. You could say that for every industry that's important, but way more so in this industry. It's people won't even do business with others unless they've met them and sat down with them for a little bit. So to lose that for the better part for more than a year has been difficult. So I think the industry's ready to get back together. And for MJBizCon this year, I really want it to be a celebration. It's about business, it's about deal flow, it's about connections, but it needs to be a celebration this year. Like, hey, we all made it through as an industry. We not only made it through, we thrived. Yeah, there were difficulties, and some companies did better than others, and some are struggling. But we as an industry proved a lot, and we were deemed essential in many states. We brought new users into the fold all over the place, and we probably gave people some pain relief and joy in a really, really difficult time for them personally. And so there's still this connection with the plant and with the users, the consumers, the patients that we can be proud of. It's not just engineering, a computer part that we're doing, right? There's more to this than that, and I think we can celebrate that.
Yeah, I think it would be unbelievable, especially if you guys include a section on just new breakthrough information at the conference, because a lot of people don't know. I did a podcast yesterday with a doctor who wasn't even aware of the fact that, or was aware. She did read the article, but a couple months back, an article had come out that I think mainstream medicine, and one of the things that we know about mainstream medicine is that whenever there's anything transformational that happens in the medical world, it's normally met with the most vehement and adamant resistance from the mainstream medical community. But we found out that there's a peer-reviewed document paper out there right now that suggests that certain flavonoids may have a better anti-inflammatory effect than the pharmaceuticals in the marketplace right now when it comes to inflammation inside the lungs because of COVID. So therefore, cannabis may even be a drug that could help when it comes to inflammation in the lungs. That's really mind-boggling for somebody who thinks, well, how could you have something that's passed through the lung tissue that could be favorable? But cannabinoids, certain of them, and some of the flavonoids together seem to have this amazing anti-inflammatory effect.
Yeah, that's what I'm excited for as we evolve with our research and understanding of this plant. Yes, we've done research, as you mentioned before. We funded it as a government here, and all the great work Machulam did. But I think we're past the tip of the iceberg. But there's a whole unexplored area of what all of this can do for people and where it can help. And I don't think we've tapped into much of that. So I expect in the coming years, hopefully, fingers crossed, that we're going to get a much better idea of how this all interacts with the human body. And I think there's going to be some fabulous findings that are really going to help people.
Well, as we've noticed now, and we've seen over the course of last year through this pandemic, that several more universities are starting to teach the endocannabinoid system in their structure for med school students, and so they're introducing this as a concept that a lot of doctors before this, even though the information has been available for the last 20 years, never bothered to even look at. But now they're starting to recognize that yes, there's something going on when we look at anandamide deficiency, which is one of the endocannabinoids that we actually form ourselves. We know that this affects people in for different illnesses. This is now fact. This is not something that is, just proffered. This is something that has now been proven. So as we start to see more and more and more of that come to fore, I think that that's going to be what's really going to be the most impactful change or boost in this industry. You got it. Our baby boomer generation is the second largest generation on this in this country, and all of us are slipping into that period of time when the last 10 years of our lives we only have 10 different bottles on our medicine cabinet that we could literally reduce the consumption of some of that by using cannabinoids instead.
Mhm.
So I think it's an exciting time and looking forward. So you're thinking you're probably going to be able to have another hold a convention in October?
Yeah, we're going full speed ahead, working with the convention center, with local officials. Events in general are starting to come back in various parts of the country. And, as the vaccine rolls out in the next 4 or 5 months, as long as that continues on its pace, I think we're going to be in good shape. Yeah, and we're going to do it safely. It's not going to look exactly like it did in the past. But, we in Denver, where we're based, We just got the All-Star game because it moved out of Georgia for those, terrible election law changes. Um, and they're saying here that could be a packed house, and that's in a couple months. So in general, I think we're going to be out of this. We're going to be able to get together as an industry, and again, just let's celebrate, give each other a pat on the back. If we can't do a hug or a fist bump or whatever we can do at that time to feel safe, and look forward to the future and figure out how we're going to continue to shape this industry. So again, we can keep what's special about it. So we can support research efforts. So we can support social equity and all the things that are important to all of us, and make this different. This is our time. You don't get another opportunity like this to build a new industry.
Speaking of this is our time, now we're starting to see again the growth in the industry across the board. It used to be, you had to go out west, but now, you've got a lot of exciting things happening on the East Coast. The East Coast industry is starting to grow. How do you see, or what would you say is the difference between the East Coast and the West Coast, and how do they differ?
There's some big differences. Just in general, the West Coast, western part of the country started out in more of a Wild West territory where they were the true pioneers. They were taking the risks when no one else would of, is the government going to come knocking on my door because I have a shop or a grow? And so it developed way differently than on the eastern part of the country, which came along later. The regulations are completely different. They're a lot stricter usually. On the
But they're a lot stricter. But then again, here in New York just passes a recreational bill that includes and allows people to smoke in public, smoke in
Yeah,
sidewalks,
and New
and
York is
also
different. Yeah,
they're
yeah.
going to be allowing actual kind of not speakeasies, but they're going to be allowing smoke shops where you can literally go and socialize and actually consume on a premise.
Yeah, and New York is changing the game on the East Coast. They're opening it up way more than these states before them in that region. So I'm really excited by what New York is doing. With devil's in the details. We have to see how it rolls out, but there seems to be a lot of opportunities for new businesses in New York, especially. And it's not just going to be controlled by a couple of the big ones that are already in the medical market. I believe there's social equity components of it, and lots of opportunities. But in general, part of your question, the West and East Coast markets are completely different in lots of ways. The people involved in the business are different. In the West, you got a lot more of the old school, kind of people again who founded the industry. In the East Coast, it is a lot of more newer entrants, which also means people with more money, which also means mainstream experience, which some of that is good and some of it's not. What we've seen in general is this kind of closing of opportunities for the smaller players, for the mom and pops everywhere, and that's unfortunate. And it has been harder on the East Coast for, if you didn't have $2 million, that you can show that you have, you couldn't get in the industry, and that's unfortunate. New York's, I think we're still waiting to see what that looks like, but I think it's going to be more inclusive in that way too.
That's great. And what do you think about from the global stuff? I mean, I was really this week I was very fortunate to be able to have a conversation with a gentleman who lives in Maryland, but now lives in South Africa, who was just schooled me on what's happening in South Africa. Lesotho just legalized cannabis for exportation. They are not legalizing it for internal country use. There's four other African nations that are doing so. This gentleman was telling me that they consider Africa to be the largest consuming population of cannabis in the world. Um, that's a burgeoning market. You're going to have India. You're going to have. We know what China is already about and doing, and China is already trying its best to corner the CBD market if they can. Colombia, Spain. What do you think the international markets are going to look like?
I love that question. I spent 2 years doing international market research for us as we expanded to more of a global company, and was in Colombia, all across Europe, and other regions of the world, including South Africa. And that's what caught me by surprise the most over the years, is that all of a sudden this kind of global movement just came out of nowhere, and you had all these countries that started legalizing. It's mainly medical at this point, mainly medical cannabis programs left and right in all regions, and it was shocking to me. Well, we sit here in the U.S. and the government's like, no, no, no. It's ridiculous, and they have all these other countries, and they're embracing it, and they're supporting it, and not all of them. There's been resistance in some, but they're doing it, and some of them are gung ho, and they see it as a new economic engine. And so we've held conferences. We held a conference in Bogota. We've held them in Copenhagen, and to your point, Asia. is a new frontier that's cropping up. When we look at MJBizCon, when we look at our attendance, we get people from 70 to 80 countries coming, with China being a big one, but all over the world. And I like to point out during my opening speeches, hey, we got someone from Vanuatu here today, and every year Kazakhstan. There's people interested everywhere. So as we see the dominoes fall internationally, this is going to become a global industry. Now it's completely different all across the world, and the Canadians had some difficulties trying to build global companies, and they made some mistakes and they overestimated the market. These are slow moving markets, but they're moving, and you're seeing more countries legalize every year. And kind of, I think that next frontier is the recreational side, and I think that just like in the U.S., there will be an evolution where as they get comfortable with medical, some of these countries will eventually move to legalizing rec. It might be a while, but this is, if you look at the long game and the long picture, the big picture for this in the long term, this is going to be global, and you're going to see competition on who can grow it and export it. And is it going to be in South America where the conditions are ripe, or is it going to be, all that's going to come into play. So I'm
Yeah.
excited for that. Specifically, it's not just about the U.S. It's not just about the U.S. and Canada. This is global. And then you have Mexico too, moving forward with legalization. That's huge.
And I mean, I think when you just said it's all about the competition. I mean, it's like I don't. Maybe I'm not trying to be racist when I say it this way, but I would not trust CBD product coming out of China if you stuck it in my mouth or stuck it in my hand and said, "Here, you can have all you want for free," just because I know that in some cases we've run into lots of issues with agriculture coming in from China that has, tainted with a lot of pesticides and the fact that, they are jumping on board the CBD isolate train as quickly as they can to see if they can start shipping. But I was shocked that, some of these international products are already being allowed to be imported into the United States, though we've always had an importation of hemp products. I'm just surprised that even now that, the DEA and we're allowing some of this importation.
Yeah, nothing surprises me anymore when it comes to federal government. So there's oversights everywhere. There's policies that don't make sense. There's ones that conflict with each other. There's just no rhyme or reason to anything being done right now, including what you just mentioned. So I mean, there's a lot to work out, right? And that's, if we talk about federal legalization, on the global side, yeah, before this is an interconnected international market, there's a lot to work through.
I
But
mean, a lot to work through to make Americans have a chance at this business.
yeah, yeah, and America, on the global scene, America's falling behind. Now, it's not a gap that can't be closed, but most of the U.S. companies have only set their sights here or maybe in Canada. The Canadian companies again made big inroads into Europe, Latin America. They've had to pull back to some degree, but the U.S. isn't leading the global cannabis conversation. It's not even involved in it. So it's such a wasted opportunity in so many ways, and you just need that light bulb to go off with people in Washington who can recognize the value of this. And if their main interest is, hey, it me look good and it's going to generate tax money, then fine. Whatever your interest is, let's move this forward. Hopefully, they'll see this as a bigger thing and a bigger, greater good for people than that.
Are you getting any invites from anybody in DC to come down and just speak to them about your knowledge base? Because I just think that half the problem in DC is the fact that there's same thing I say with the mass exception or acceptance is the idea that education, education, education. I mean, we have Congress people, we have senators who just won't even bother to listen to the facts.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've had connections in DC. I think it's what you're seeing is there's just this holdout group of people in Congress mainly, and mainly from red states, that these are older people who grew up with a different mentality, and they haven't been strong enough. And I'll use those words. They have not been strong enough to re-examine this or to realize why they should at least, hey, let's start with a blank slate. And the good thing is, as more states legalize, especially red states medical and then recreational, they're going to have to listen soon. And
I would think that by
really
that time, I mean, look, we changed. Lots of transformative issues have changed America with less state inclusive policies than cannabis. I mean, you take a look at what happened when we decided that yes, gay and trans people can marry. Gay marriage is accepted in America. And I think we only had maybe 20 something states that accepted it before the nation said, we got to do something. You know, we can look back at almost everything that's changed in this country has changed with a smaller number of states than this. And right now, you got what 36 states in the District of Columbia that have a law. Come on, that's only 14 missing. You would think to me that we'd say, sorry, majority rules.
No, again, it's absurd, and you're right, and that's a very good point. That we've had just as much significant change federally in some areas with much less progress and momentum that we have in marijuana. And I don't know what it's going to take. I think the legalization in New York is very positive because that's the heart of the financial world. And honestly, what's going to move politicians? It's lobbying and money. And if you get the big investment banks and investors with this in their backyard, with recreational in their backyard, and they're clamoring and banging on the door, maybe that's what it takes. I don't know, but politicians are weird creatures, and you don't know what's going to move them. And the fact that you had just highlighted that despite all this, they're just like, I'm sticking my feet in the mud, almost like a baby, just sticking to their ways is ludicrous.
And when you said it's very funny, I laugh only a little bit. There were delivery services for cannabis in New York City 10 years ago, 12 years ago. So it's not like it hasn't been in their backyard. You can't go down to Wall Street when they stop allowing smoking inside of buildings, I'm going to tell you, you walk along the edges of several streets in Wall Street, and that wafting smell is not that of tobacco.
But now
So
they're going to see the what they need to be convinced to put their money behind. They're going to see the state legal operations and say, "Oh, this is a real industry. That I can get behind, and there's likely going to be profits." So again, it's not great that profits are driving changes in attitudes, but it is part of the bigger picture. And that is the only thing that's going to convince some people that we need to be on our side to really get this change federally.
you have a new fact book coming out, right? Is that tell us a little bit about what insights that offers?
Yeah, we've been doing that
Is
for about
MJ Biz new fact book? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's the Marijuana Business Fact Book. We've been doing it since 2012, and it's really research on the industry. It's especially beneficial for people looking to get in, new entrants that are looking to start businesses, to invest, to potentially change their careers. And we track, sales growth. We track all the different niches and what the trends are, and a state by state breakdown of what the laws are and the opportunities and the number of licenses. So, one of the great things that's happened in recent years is there's more data and information available. When we first started doing this fact book, there was nothing. No one was tracking anything. So it was very hard to get your head around what is this industry? What is it all about? So we've been able to enhance this over the years. And it's a tool that a lot of people use for, again, business planning, pitch decks, and just to understand the industry.
What advice would you give someone who wants to get started in the cannabis business right now?
Yeah, I mean, two things. It sounds kind of trite, but do your homework. Like, you can't just come into the industry and think you'll pick it up easily and think it's just like where you came from. It's so different. And I think that leads me to my next point is you have to really take some time to understand the industry, understand what it's about. The industry in New York is different from the industry in Colorado, is different from the industry in Florida, is different from the industry in California. You name it. It's so different everywhere. The people running businesses, the people involved are different. The way you do business is different. And so you've got to come into this knowing and open to learning about it, get your base level understanding, and use your expertise in the right ways. So you might have been great at your marketing job at a tech company, and you've got won all these accolades and moved your way up. If you come into this industry, don't just rely on that. Don't have that hubris, because again, the way business is done here is different, and I can't stress that enough. So you've got to use your expertise as a foundation to enter and grow in this industry, but you can't be the know-it-all. You can't think what you used in the past will work, because it won't always work. And I've seen this time and time again when people come in at all levels, from a basic level all the way up to a founder or a CEO. And if you don't take these two steps, do your research and make sure you understand the industry, and then come in and continue that learning and continue to adapt how you do your job to the needs of this industry, you will likely be successful. If you don't, you'll likely fail.
If you had to put that crystal ball on, what do you think is going to happen in, let's say, even the next 2 years? We've now just come out of this pandemic. and come out of this pandemic with probably more new users, new consumers than we've had in the last 15 years. More people, I understand that, when you really take a look at the industry itself, some of that money that was hesitant to get in are now starting to sniff around again. So if you had to put a crystal ball on, what would you think is going to happen in the next 2 years?
Oh, my crystal ball's all over the board. Over the last 10 years, I've been spot on sometimes and totally off others. It's so unpredictable. But I would say, based on kind of all our experience, I'm cautiously optimistic that we will see some type of federal change by the end of next year. I don't know what that'll look like. I hope it's banking. That's the general feel, is let's try and get a change to banking and open this up, which will go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I was going to ask you real quick. Have you seen this kind financial model that's out of?
Mhm.
What do you think of them? That's
Yeah,
a
I mean,
banking editor.
there's a lot of these models out there, and in terms of talking about specific models or
Sure.
companies or whatever, I try to stay away from that. But there's always been a new model, right, for this, and and there are some that work. It's hard to unroll them out on a national level, but I applaud everyone who's trying to help figure out the situation, including Kind. I think that, but until there's a federal change, specifically with banking, this is always going to be an issue no matter what solution comes up. So I think that is the most logical, most realistic step. Hopefully it goes further than that, but that will open the doors for the industry in many, many ways. And if we can get changes with banking, if there's anything with 280E, so people can actually make the money in this industry instead of having the government take it all away, even though it says it's illegal to operate. But yeah, we'll let you operate, but we're going to also tax you.
Yeah, going to tax the hell out of you. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm hoping by the end of next year. Now, again, nothing would surprise me. So what we were talking earlier, if this just kind of stalls or something else comes up that gets in the way, or there's that resistance, it's not a slam dunk. But the stars are aligned in a way they've never been aligned before for some meaningful change. And so who am I have natural skepticism as a former journalist, and everything I do, I'm switching that off and saying I'm optimistic. I think that now's the time we can do this, and I'm hoping there'll be some significant change, that this time next year.
Okay. Well, one more time. If somebody wanted to tap into your resources, where do they go?
Yeah, the main portal is MJBizDaily.com. And from there, you can check out MJBizCon. We're launching registration soon, and check out everything else we do.
And again, you are planning on holding your next conference in October timeframe?
Yep, we're in the second half of October and in the Las Vegas Convention Center, and they're welcoming us with open arms, and we're ready to rock.
Super. Well, I can't tell you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing some of your insight to all of our listeners here at Let's Be Blunt with Montel. I think the key is to make sure that we, keep telling the story, and we tell it in the ways like the way you tell it. So thank you so much for what you're doing. Um, I really, applaud your optimism. I hope that, this Democratic administration, got both the Senate and Congress. Come on now. If there's a chance that they could pull this off, this is the chance to pull it off. So, no, sir. Anytime you ever want to talk about anything, you always have a home here at Let's Be Blunt with Montel. And I can't thank you enough for sharing with all of our viewers there. And make sure that all of you out there, remember, tune in to Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments.